Hello, everyone. Happy hump
Right.
day. Today is Wednesday, right? Yeah, it's Wednesday. I'm going to change my view. Maybe see a few of the folks who are actually on the webinar. Feel free to say hi if you know me or even if you're new to me. Say hi in the comments. I am really excited about this. So many of my parts are like all over the place, a little hyper right now. Very excited about what we're doing today. For the folks who are joining us live, Facebook or YouTube, just know that my parts are kind of really excited to have you here in this virtual space with us today. So we're talking about a hard topic, but I believe hard topics don't have to be, number one, boring, and they don't have to be emotionally traumatizing, right? I believe that we can have hard conversations with compassion and an open heart and just a lot of curiosity. So that's what we're gonna set the intention to do today, is to have some very necessary conversations for a time such as this, and to invite people who may have wanted to talk about these things to really chime in and be heard. And so I'm here with Dick Schwartz, my I can say my good friend now. I think I can
Yeah, you
say that.
can. I'm proud to
Yeah,
say that too.
yeah. He said to say that like 2 years ago, but my parts were like, hell no. But I think I'm getting there.
Fantastic.
So shout out to IFS for helping me. Myself personally, I've evolved and grown so much since I met Dick the first time, and even more so before that when I was introduced to the model as a client. So many of you know that I'm on social media, really spreading awareness of not just mental health, but wellness, emotional wellness, and how we can all just strive to be a little bit better in our lives to ourselves, right? Not for anybody else, but so that you can have more joy and really thrive, right? And we know that right now, a lot of people are struggling, me included. I think all of us. I think it would be abnormal to not have any kind of challenge right now emotionally. But again, I want to check in with everyone who's watching. I am excited to have you connected here with us. And I want to ask just one question, because I know that some people may not be hearing this question right now. Hey, Tammy. Hi, Tammy. So Tammy is, she has an IFS podcast. Hey, girl. Hey. But I want to ask Tammy, you and everyone else, because a lot of us are healers or we're
Tammy.
leaders. Dick, even, we're not often asked, "How are you?" Right? How are you? So check around with your part, see if there's any part that might be dominant that wants to be heard, and you can check with your other parts and see if it would be okay to share that. Like I say, even if you're on Facebook or YouTube, a lot of us right now are just needing connection, and we need somebody to say and care and want to know, like to really ask and care, how are you doing? And we are, some of us need a place to share that, right? So I think that this could be a place to share. So I was asking Dick before we jumped on, Dick, how are you? I'm sure not many people ask you about your parts.
Well, I'm excited to be with you, and I'm glad you call me your friend, and I'm glad that I've earned that designation. And I'm excited about this topic because I think it's an important one, particularly these days, because a lot of parts and their burdens are coming up now. And I'm good overall. Sometimes I feel guilty saying that, but it's nice to have a break from the crazy travel schedule I had. And I'm actually getting to know my wife for the first time. And
Cute.
yeah, so that side of it's good. And then, of course, I have parts that are worried about what's going to happen, like we all have, and feel the suffering of lots of other people. So it's a combination. I mean, it's it's nice to be able to accept all those parts and not feel guilty for the part that feels good,
Right.
and also not feel oppressed by the ones that are critical of me for feeling good and so on. So
Right. Right. And so I was also explaining to Dick that a lot of my audience, they hear me talking about parts, but they don't always understand. I don't always explain what a part is. So from my perspective, a part is like something that developed from one of my experiences, typically in childhood, and it holds some fear or beliefs about myself, others, or the world. It usually has something to do with safety for me. And
mhm.
so, the more I spend time with my parts, listen to my parts, I think that's really the key in the beginning, is just so much of us were taught to block out everything that we're hearing inside of ourselves and listen
Right.
to the world, listen to others. Other people are the authority for our lives. It's kind of the message I think that society gives us. And we're going to talk more about that through these legacy burdens. It tells you what to believe, what to think, how to behave. If you're a woman, you're supposed to behave this way. If you're a Black person, we automatically view you this way. Or, if you're poor, or just whatever, experience you're finding yourselves in, oftentimes we're giving labels and we're told kind of the script for that part.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, IFS has really taught me to redefine my own roles for myself and
Mm-hmm.
to maybe not prioritize all of them, right? Like I was telling Dick, with the quarantine and getting ready for today, it was really hard to be the stylist, the nail technician, the makeup artist, the IT person. It's a lot. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm also allowing myself to say whatever I'm doing is enough.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah.
So
So, go
yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
it's been really refreshing. I will also say that this experience has been kind of mainly a high for me. However, there were some lows in the beginning. And I want to share these parts of myself with others who might have been experiencing something similar. If you come from like maybe a family with a lot of dysfunction, or you come from poverty, and you've maybe, your experience has changed, but some of your parts are still stuck there. And so that's been a lot of my life is, I grew up in poverty. I grew up with a mother who was addicted to drugs, a lot of untreated mental illness, a lot of racism in Texas. And I'm no longer there, but some of my parts still are,
That's
right?
right.
So I had to really talk to them and listen to them. And when this epidemic or pandemic first happened, my parts were very panicked. And I had to really figure out, I was really hysteric at some points. And I had to figure out like, okay, what is it that they're needing? What is it that they're trying to tell me? Why is this activated? And I noticed that a part of me felt trapped. So being told you can't go, the logical self, the highest self of me realized that, okay, this is actually kind of similar to our regular everyday schedule. For me, I work from home, everything's on the internet. So myself was saying, there's not many things that have actually changed for you. But my parts were saying, we're being restricted. We're being told, not to be, not to do, not to go. And it felt very, I almost like claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm.
And some people say they feel that way on cruise ships. It's important to, I think, to just notice experience emotionally when they feel similar to a previous experience. So that's kind of what my interpretation of parts is, an understanding of my own parts, and just sharing, an example of some parts that I've still struggled with and kind of working through. But it's a beautiful journey once you're even open to listening to them. I think that you just become very in tune with what's happening.
Yeah, Duran, could you say more about when you finally did turn inside and listen to the part that felt trapped?
Right.
Uh, what did you do with it, or where did it take you? Anything you could say?
Well, like I said, for me, I had a very traumatizing childhood. And for those of you who are familiar with like the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences scale, I'm a 9 out of 10. So I have, the whole gamut of child abuse and poverty and neglect. And being told like you have no control. And I realized it was more so about powerlessness. That was the exile. We consider exile parts that we push way down. And as a Black woman, I'm supposed to be strong. I'm
Mhm,
not supposed to have a weakness. And I realized that was the legacy burden.
mhm,
That there's, okay, this is a normal thing to be afraid about. And
mhm,
a friend said to me, it's okay to be scared.
mhm.
And that little partner heard that and thought, oh, well, I never heard that before. Like, no. And I said, if they're Black. And I said, have you ever heard another Black person say it's okay to be scared?
Mhm.
Because, many, many generations ago, being scared could get us killed.
Absolutely. That's right. And that's a great example of what we call a legacy burden. So just to do a little teaching piece around burdens. So as Duran said, we have these parts. And if you grew up in a perfectly harmonious family and a perfectly harmonious culture, they'd just be in their naturally valuable states and you wouldn't even notice them. They'd just be helping you in your life. But we all had traumas to some degree. Not, I'm nowhere near a 9 on that scale, but I have my traumas, and those experiences sort of inject our system with these extreme beliefs and emotions that we come to call burdens. And those extreme beliefs, like the one you're talking about, which is you can never be vulnerable, you can never be scared, you have to be strong all the time, attached to certain of our parts and become almost like organizers of their experience, almost like, to use a word that's hot right now, it's almost like they are a virus that enter one of our parts and drives the way it operates thereafter, and drives it to be extreme. And so we all have burdens that come from our direct experience, like traumas and like the abuse you've alluded to, and what's called attachment injuries. But we also carry burdens that didn't happen to us, that came into us through our lineage or through our ethnic group, or there are burdens that are just floating around in the American culture that also attach to our parts and drive them. We call those legacy burdens. And they're very powerful organizers of our experience. And part of why they're so powerful is because we often don't even notice them, because we just think that's the way it should be. Like you were talking about with I should always be strong. That's, until you're forced to notice it, you just think it's true. And it really organizes everything in your life. And so that's why these legacy burdens are really important to try and explore, and ultimately to unburden, to what we call unload, because once parts are released from them, it's almost like a curse has been lifted and they can transform into who they really are. So if you don't mind saying some more about it. So you found the part that
Yeah.
carries this burden of you have to be strong. And then what happened?
And I want to go back to what you said about like it feels true, because especially right now, there are a lot of people who, don't have the privilege that I have. And I always want to honor that. I always want to acknowledge the parts of our country that that is their reality, that they have to be strong and go to work. They have to be strong and keep the roof over for their kids' head, for their kids. They have to, maybe they're single mothers, or they just lost their job and they can't afford to fall apart at this very moment. I can relate to that. I did 18 years in the military,
Mm-hmm.
and throughout those years, it did not feel like, at any point, it was a great time to be vulnerable or,
Mm-hmm.
really acknowledge any of my parts that were afraid.
Yeah.
And so I want to say that is real, systemically for some people in their lives. And right, we don't want to be stuck there.
Yeah.
When there comes a time, if there ever comes a time where that is no longer true for you, and
Yeah.
that thought, or that, does that urge or that pattern is no longer serving your life. That was kind of the experience for me. When I left the military, I realized that I had adapted to that, and I had adapted to my whole life in ways that weren't going to take me where I wanted to go afterward. And so I'm constantly, I do like periodic throughout my day that not a large part of my day is spent just listening to my parts. As I said, listening to the inner dialogue that's happening inside of me. So when I found this powerlessness part, I'd actually been projecting it onto my partner.
Mhm.
And I had been saying, why do men have such a hard time being vulnerable? And why isn't it more easy for you to just admit that you have no control over the situation, that you're scared? And
Mhm.
I couldn't even do that myself.
Mhm.
So another really useful tool for me in IFS is the UTurn, being able to say whatever I'm saying to someone else, what would it be like if I was saying that to myself? Or
Mhm.
to my parts, or to me,
Mhm.
I have to be careful with the word self now, because I realize for me, I believe self is encompassing of, all love and greatness. So I do believe that, everyone has it. Everyone has a self. And if I am saying this person is, this or that, maybe I'm seeing a reflection of myself.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I started to sit with that part. And of course, it took me back to the 4-year-old little girl. I have a lot of parts around 4 years old.
Mhm.
I think that was a time when I really took responsibility for my sisters and my mother. And, like my mother just would stop waking up to feed us. And so I had to kind of really figure out, okay, you know, of course, as a 4-year-old, you have so many questions.
Mhm.
Why is this happening? Why do I have to do this? How do I do this?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of sense of powerlessness. And at that time, I actually did have very little power over the situation.
Absolutely.
And so I was able to go back and be with that little girl and just acknowledge like how much she did. That was a big thing that she did.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And just acknowledging that she was like, oh, someone sees me and they're normalizing how I feel.
Mhm.
All these years she's felt powerless because had this huge challenge ahead of her, had
Mhm.
no idea, every day it was like, are we gonna die?
That's right.
Because I'm not prepared for this job. So, and it's my job to keep us alive.
That's right. And she certainly couldn't afford to be vulnerable. She had
Right.
to be strong all the time.
Exactly.
So you were able to acknowledge all that, and then what happened? How did you help her?
Well, I haven't quite, this is the thing about, self-therapy. I think you can only take yourself so far. And I applaud my parts. They do really good work.
Uh-huh.
but, but you kind of need someone else to say, okay, like, kind of nudge you along sometimes because the parts are still scared
Yeah.
and they're unsure. And they're like, can we really trust this? So for me, because my parts, I have so many parts that didn't know self at all.
Mhm.
It's like starting a whole new parenting relationship,
That's right.
and the baby has to really get used to this other person and to know that they're going to take care of them, that
That's
they're
right.
not going to forget about them, they're not going to get too busy, like all the other things that they've experienced from their actual physical parent. So she still has some of those parts. And so I usually just take my time with them. This one is about like a month old, about the time of the pandemic.
Mhm.
And so I just been sitting with her. We went to the beach. We've done a lot of things that Facebook has seen.
Mhm.
A couple people on Facebook, if you follow me, you've seen me take her to the beach, and she wanted to go for a road trip with me and just spend some time. And I try to treat them as good as I would my own child because I love him, very deeply. And I think that has helped, like being a parent and knowing what kind of parenting experience my son is enjoying
Yeah,
and kind of how I can recreate that for myself.
I agree. It really takes that kind of taking them that literally and that seriously as if they were your own children.
Right.
They don't need the same level of maintenance as your child
Thank
does,
goodness.
but they need you to remember them and to go back to them. And so what I'm hearing you say is the action of doing the U-turn, turning back. What is this about? Why am I feeling so scared? Following the fear instead of trying to push it away or, you know, uh, or, or blend with it, have it dominate. You separate from it, you listen to it, it shows you where it's stuck, which is when you were 4 and you had to take care of your family. And this is why it feels so trapped now, because that is so similar in some ways. And just that awareness, it sounds like, just knowing where this is coming from, you were able to separate and not stay in that fear. Uh, and you still have yet to actually heal and unburden that little girl. Does that sound right?
Right.
You want to finish up with her?
She's really scared because she feels like um, if you give up your strength, that's the only power you've ever known.
Right. Yeah. Do you want to do a piece of work?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
You ready?
Of course, parts are saying, hell no.
I don't want you to feel pressured. There's no pressure at all. I just want to offer.
No, it's it's for me, you know, it's
That's,
whatever it is that I'm going to achieve, it's for me.
that's right.
So,
Okay, you ready?
yeah, thank you guys, all the people in the webinar.
Yeah.
Very encouraging. That's sweet.
All right, so focus on her and find her in your body or around your body.
Mm. She's in my heart.
How do you feel toward her as you notice her there?
Yep.
How do you feel toward her?
Just have a lot of care and admiration and love.
So let her know all that, see how she reacts.
She's enjoying that.
Good, good, good. So she trusts that you care about her right now?
She knows
Okay,
I like her.
good. It's really important. So ask her if she does feel like you understand what happened to her back there, or if there's more she wants you to do, wants you to know about it.
She was just kind of telling me like she wasn't allowed to say how hard it was because she knew it was hard for my mom too.
Yeah,
And
okay.
she wanted, like, I asked her, "Do you want me to say that out loud? Is that important?" She said, "Yeah."
Yeah,
Like, to be spoken, needs to have words. Just, you know, the
that's right.
dilemma there.
Yeah, so let
She
her
said,
know.
"Mom, so much."
Yeah, of course she did. Let her know we're all getting that she wasn't able to speak this and how hard that was for her. And just see if there's anything more she wants you to know about it.
It's funny. I would have never asked her that. Like, I would have never even think about how important that was.
Yeah,
It's really important.
it's good. I'm glad she was able to tell you.
Mm.
Anything else she wants you to get right now?
No, she's like, that was the main thing, is that she wanted to, you know, that was the hardest part, is feeling like if you say this, then, you know, you don't love your mom, or, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Duran. So I'm going to invite you now, if you're ready,
Mm-hmm.
to go to her in that time and be with that 4-year-old in the way she needed somebody. Just tell me when you're in there with her.
Yeah.
How are you being with her?
I just looked at her and I told her, you can tell me anything.
Great. That's great.
Beauty of it. You can tell me
Yeah.
whatever you want.
How's she reacting?
She's kind of like, huh?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
anything? Are you sure? Like, got some pretty crazy wild stuff I can come up with. Like, yeah, I remember when my son was 4, you know,
Mhm.
it's fine. It's all fine. Yeah.
Can she believe you?
Yeah. When I told her, I had to remind her, like, I have a kid who's 8, almost 8.
I know what
He was
those.
4 at one point, you know, not too long ago. He was 4. So I
Mhm.
kind of know how
Okay. So
real
she believes you
things.
now.
Yeah. That's what I
Anything-
have to have, like, real conversations with
Yeah,
her.
for sure. And Duran, ask her if there's anything else she needs you to do with her or for her back there before we take her to a good place.
It doesn't feel like it. It felt like it was just really important for her to tell me what her dilemma was, like what that
Okay.
struggle was.
All right. So she doesn't need you to do anything with the mother or the siblings or,
You know,
okay. All right. So see if now she's ready to leave that time and place with you and come to a safe, comfortable place.
She's like, yeah, I want to see this kid you got.
Okay, good, good, good. She'll have a playmate. So she wants to come to your house, wants to come to where
Yeah,
you are now.
yeah,
So let's bring her there, bring her right to you and tell me when she's there with you.
she's here. Hmm.
It's great. How does she like being there with you?
It doesn't look the way she expected it to look, so she's kind of
Better or worse?
she's taking it in. I think it's gonna take her a while to get used to
Okay, and she can check it out.
it.
And tell her she never has to go back there and you're going to be taking care of her now. And given that, see if she's ready to unload these burdens, these feelings and beliefs she got from that time.
She said there's like this thing around like poverty and racism that she isn't quite ready to let go of because she's a little worried about like the other people that still experience and
Okay.
things.
Yeah, she doesn't have to let go of anything. But how about the fear and the sense of being trapped?
Yeah.
She's up for letting go of that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And ask her where she carries that in her body or on her body.
Actually in her neck, in her shoulders and the neck area.
Yeah. And ask what she'd like to give it all up to: light, water, fire, wind, earth, or anything else.
She likes fire.
Okay,
As soon as you said fire, she was like, yep, fire.
great. So tell her, go ahead and set up a fire for her and tell her to take that out of her neck and her shoulders and put it in the fire. Let the fire take care of it.
She said, all done.
Good. How does she feel without it?
She feels good. She's like warming her hands with the fire.
Good. That's great. So tell her now if she wants to, she can invite qualities into her that she'd like to have and just see what comes in.
Now she's really glad that she chose fire. She's like, we can just take like the fire, the element of fire,
Great.
and keep that.
So how's she seem now?
She's happy.
Good. That's great. And then Duran, let's invite in all the parts that have been protecting her so they can see that they don't need to do that now. And maybe particularly that part that believed you had to be strong all the time. And just see how they react.
They're happy to know that she's gonna be okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
And maybe check with that part that tries to keep you strong all the time and just see how it's doing in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the one that was kind of like, okay, as long as she's gonna be okay.
Okay, good. Then see if it's interested in unloading that legacy burden, that belief that you have to be strong. It doesn't have to, but just check and see if it's up for that.
Not quite yet.
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, she's willing to like pass it back to my mom,
Yeah,
but there's so much, like other pain beyond that. She's like, I think they needed to be strong. Maybe parts of them needed to be strong. I don't know. It's hard to imagine.
parts of your parents or
My
part,
like my grandmother, like having to go out and pick cotton.
yeah. No, they did. They couldn't, like you said, it's a luxury to be able to do this. They couldn't afford that luxury. But does she want to give it back to them or does she want to send it out or does she want to
It
keep it?
wants to show them like what their sacrifice enabled for me,
Uh-huh. Fantastic.
right? To like the legacy gift that's been passed down
Let's
because of
let,
the strength that they had. Like I could be here to do this.
that's perfect. So let's do that. So invite them, their spirits to come and tell me if they show up.
Yeah, it's like the whole room.
Okay, good. And I want you to go ahead and tell them about what their sacrifices allowed for you and see how they react.
I'm proud.
That's great. Yeah, let them know how grateful you are. And Duran, you can see if there's anything they want you to know right now.
They're rooting for me.
Yeah, that's great.
Like they all have their hand on my shoulder and they're just telling me like that they're proud of me and they're here for me.
That's right. Yeah. And let all your parts take that in. It really helps to know you're not alone in this world because they're right there with you.
Some of the older ones are like, dry your eyes, girl.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, before we stop, let's go back one more time to that protector with the legacy burden of strength and see how it's doing now.
Everybody's feeling so proud. Like,
It's great.
it's proud of the ancestry, proud of the heritage, proud
Mhm.
of like all the resilience and
Mhm.
all the parts. Like, just
Yeah.
like, just grateful for everything.
Yeah. We'll just let them know that we see them and we see what it took to get where you are, not only for your ancestors, but also for you. And we honor your protectors.
Mm,
How's it feel now?
feeling really good.
Good.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for that. It was beautiful. And
Oh, hi, Chicha. All my friends are here. I'm so glad y'all are here.
I've just been watching the chats come up and everybody's loving it. They they just are so grateful to you for going there and being so vulnerable. So I am too.
Me too. Shout out to my parts.
Uh-huh. So this is, it's a really great example of how we can use this time, because a time like this is triggering all kinds of parts in everybody.
Yeah.
And they can be what we call trailheads, which are, the beginning of a trail that if you follow like you did, you find these key parts that need so desperately to be healed that actually will make a big difference in the rest of your life if you do it. So that's a great message to everybody about how to use this, what we call tormenting experience. It's a tormentor in the sense that by tormenting you, it mentors you about what you got to heal.
Right.
So, so what do we do now?
I'm wondering. I want to go through the comments because I saw Connie. I saw so many of my friends.
Okay,
But I'm
go ahead.
wondering, do I have access to this after? I'm sure I will. Like the comment section.
I think there is a way to save it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Figure it
maybe
out.
share notes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to be able to go back through the comments. Thanks to everyone who's sending love and encouragement. I really appreciate that. And I think that's for me. That's what I'm learning more and more when it comes to legacy burdens, and collective legacy burdens, especially. Like racism and individualism. It disconnects you. It makes
Uh-huh.
you feel like you're not welcome. We say all parts are welcome, but it makes you feel like you're not welcome.
That's
And
right.
being able to connect to all my parts, it makes me feel more connected to others, and it's just really deep in the connection I have, with the world. So
That's right. That's right. So just for those of you who are new to IFS, what Duran did was start with a protector, which we met at the end, which was the part that has this belief about always being strong and never show vulnerability. And then in staying with that and accepting that part and listening to it, it showed her this 4-year-old, which we call an exile. And we call it an exile uh, because it was so vulnerable and carried such a huge burden of responsibility. Duran kind of locked it away and didn't want to listen to its fear anymore, or its feeling trapped, so she could function in life. And so we all have those kinds of exiles, not just those kind, but we all have exiles. And a real tribute to you and the work you've done that you could even do that on your own. I mean, I can't often get past my protectors
mm,
by myself. I often need somebody holding my hand to go as far as you did.
mhm.
Uh, but it's possible to go in and actually heal and unburden the little girl in the way you did. And once you do that, then you're not going to feel the same level of trapped and terror
Mhm.
in any circumstance like this. And which is not to say that for a lot of people there are good reason to be terrified right now that don't have
Mhm.
to do with their parts necessarily.
Right.
Um, but even in that case, you can still take care of your parts in this way instead of having them overwhelm you.
Right. Someone asked, and I want to address this question because I think it's really important, especially when we talk about the collective and collective legacy burdens. I saw that question pop up in the comments. Someone asked, how does it feel as a Black woman to be led in this work by a white man? I didn't get to read the whole comment, but I will say that there is a difference. I'm going to, first speak for that part. Um, and it's not a good or bad difference. It's just a difference of experience. I had a part that I unburdened with my good friend Rakina Barnes. She helped me unburden a self-esteem part that was very, really a big part for my life. So
Mhm.
shout out to her. And she's a fellow Black woman, and it was a legacy burden that we both carried. And having that shared experience, it was super powerful. We were just both saying, like, that's why we do the work that we do. That's why we love being IFS, trained in IFS, and why we're trying to spread this model to so many other therapists, especially Black therapists, because I feel like this model is, I almost felt like, for me, when I first encountered it, that it was handcrafted for Black people. Because we have so many things that we've been forced to stuff down and ignore and hide and suppress and not look at. Like, there's such a stigma against even acknowledging that you have a feeling.
Yeah.
And so shout out to all of the Black therapists who rock. We have a Facebook group of 22,000 therapists who just need a space where they can say the things that no one in our community is saying, and no one outside of our community is saying either. So if you're watching and you have access to Facebook, please go over to our Facebook page and like the page, because we have a lot of conversations there that I think more people need to be in on, and to be concerned about, like the health disparity with COVID-19. So many more African Americans are dying from this pandemic, and it's for a plethora of reasons and systemic issues that really need to be addressed and acknowledged. So we've been talking a lot about that this week. And in regards to what people call the savior complex, right? To have someone who doesn't look like me guide me on this journey. Again, I see it as a privilege, because 50 years ago, this was a gift that my ancestors wouldn't have at all. And I believe the gift that I'm going to give the world is that 50 years from now, there will be more therapists like me that look like me, and there will be more healing of people who look like me, right? So we're just not there yet. And then that's kind of how I embrace that one day, the vision is that there will be more of me and more of us. But until that day, this is what we have. And I really feel that it's an honor, right, to do this work that my grandmother couldn't do at all. Right.
Duran, I see a lot of questions about how you get to your Facebook page. You want to?
Oh, okay. Maybe I can. That's the group. Someone just posted the group. We try to keep the group just for Black therapists, because, like I said, that's a space that they really find sacred. We have a public Facebook page that we can post it on the IFS page, or I don't know how you guys found it, or we might send it out in the email, maybe when they send out the play, we can send the link out for that as well. But we have a public page to have like public discussions around, how racism is impacting health and overall well-being right now.
Yeah, I think this crisis brings a lot of these these cultural legacy burdens to the surface, where you can't deny them. It's in your face. And so, similar to how how you use the crisis to heal, it'd be great if our country would do that and say, look at what we've done, how unequal things are for people of color. And that's the reason the death rates are so much higher.
Right.
Instead of having the Surgeon General, who's Black, get up and say, you guys need to take more personal responsibility for your health, and he was echoing one of, I think, the most powerful legacy burdens in our culture, which is individualism and willpower, in the sense that if you got a problem, it's because you're lazy or you're not trying hard enough, rather than looking at the systemic issues that are causing it. And so anyway, that individualism is one of the 4 legacy burdens, cultural legacy burdens, I write about in the new, with Martha Sweezy, I write about with the new edition of the Internal Family Systems Therapy book. And I'm proud of that whole section. And those of you who are interested in legacy burdens would find a lot more material on that.
Yay, that's exciting. Yeah. I know we're going to be talking about it in the continuity program as well, and I'm really excited. I already recorded the first 2 videos on individualism and materialism. And again, these are things that are just in the air we breathe. We want to say, oh, no, not me. Everyone wants to say, I'm not a racist. I'm not an individualist. But these, again, it's in the air, it's in our media, it's in our news, it's in our it's everywhere. It's in our music. You know, when I see it from my 5-year-old son when he went to kindergarten and came home saying he wished he was white. And I'm like, but your mom is the founder of Black Therapist Rock. You know, how did this happen? How did that get in my house? You know, how did racism get in here? You know? But
you
it's
can't escape it.
everywhere.
I
laugh about it, but it is literally, now that I'm more, aware of it, it's everywhere. And we're all breathing it in.
It is everywhere. And one of the things I'm hoping to do, because while the anti-racism movement has done many, many good things and educating people, it can make you try to exile the part of you that carries the burden of racism. And then it becomes implicit racism.
Right. We just don't talk about it, or we pretend nice, we make nice.
Yeah, you pretend you don't have it. You pretend you're a white guy who isn't a racist and just loves everybody. And then that racist part has to operate behind the scenes. And so I try to help people. I've done this with white people mainly. Find that racist part inside of them. And no, it's not a bundle of racism. It's a part that carries the legacy burden of racism. And as they listen to it and help it, they can actually unload that racism. But you can't unload it unless you go to it.
Right. And I think as a country, like, if we're not willing to say,
That's right.
we have the leader of this nation saying, certain just certain things that he says that are extremely racist. And if we're not willing to unload that and unpack that, it's like it's gonna stay there. It's gonna be stuck in that time when when it was even more visible.
Yeah. Like I say, it's good that it's out in the open now, and it's we see that there's a major problem. I mean, many of us have always known that, but now it really can't be denied. So ideally, whoever's our next president will be motivated to start to address it.
Right. Someone asked a question about individual legacy burdens versus collective legacy burdens. Collective legacy burdens is actually a word that I made up. And Dick is allowing me to proceed with it. But that was my term when I went to a workshop that Dick did back in 2018, I believe it was summer of 2018, on legacy burdens. And he said the 4 main legacy burdens of America were racism, patriarchy, individualism, and materialism. And it was like everything in the room stopped when he said that for me. And I just had so many epiphanies. All my parts jumped for joy that someone was willing to say, these are not things that are all in your head. These are things that you've been struggling with for a long time. And somebody just gave it words. And so those words were really meaningful for me. So I've been really reflecting on them, studying more about it, reading literature on these topics. And this was kind of the way that I conceptualized it for me and my parts, and trying to help other people who experience parts impacted by those 4 main things. Individual legacy burdens for me are just the things that are true for my own individual heritage or lineage,
right,
in my own family or my own culture, my own identity, versus things that I feel like we experience as a collective, as a community, as a nation, as a society. These are colonization has really did a number on all of our minds. That's and right. It's become our way of life, and we're not aware. It's not in our consciousness, right? So raising the consciousness for the collective is kind of how I see that.
Totally agree. I call them cultural legacy burdens, but collective is fine too.
Yeah. So a lot more questions. Are we going to go through questions, or are we?
Okay. I've got
about 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Dick? Go through some questions? Swimming in it. Yeah, we are swimming in it.
Yeah.
Things we swim in, someone said. There are a lot of worldwide therapists and thinkers who are interested in collective legacy burdens. They call them collective ancestral trauma. Thank you, Dorothy. I love that. I was also reading a little bit from the first. I have the first edition of the IFS book, and I've been a lot more interested in systemic thinking, and you wrote a lot about that as well, Dick. I wanted to kind of just hear more of your perspective on that for people who might be new to systems thinking, because we call it internal family systems, and people always ask me, why is it internal family systems? I'm like, because your family lives in you.
Yeah.
Right, that's just my simple explanation. But I wanted to kind of get your perspective on like systems thinking and how that impacts us individually or
Yeah, I'm working on a new book on IFS and spiritual stuff, and I have a big section on in it now on systems thinking because I've
mm,
not really gone into that as much as I'd wanted to in other books. But the big advantage to systems thinking is um, non-systems thinking takes a person and says, "You've got this disease, you've got this mental problem, you've got schizophrenia, or you've got panic disorder, or, you have this. This is who you are." But systems thinking says, "No, let's look at the context this person lives in and all the different forces that impact them and that are triggering this constantly in them." And so that could be their family system, which is where I started. But the more I did, the more I saw it was also cultural. It was also systemic racism. It was also all the things that people are impacted about. And so systems thinking makes you look at a person's context to make sense of their behavior. So that's one big contribution of systems thinking. And then also you'll notice that there are what's called reinforcing feedback loops all the time,
mhm,
where as you, for example, hate one of your parts, let's say you've got an addiction and you try to go to war against that part of you that's just trying to protect you, it'll get stronger and you'll have to get more hateful of yourself about having it. And that creates what we call a polarization between two parts. Whereas if you instead start to see systemically how it's protecting an exile and it has to do this job, it has to take you to this addiction, or else it's afraid you're going to be overwhelmed by that pain. And then maybe that'll trigger some other part that's going to be suicidal. So it's keeping you alive by keeping you with the drug. And when you have that systems, the perspective of this behavior makes sense in terms of this system, then you get a map about how to change it that's very different than rehab or something like that. So that's a very short and incomplete description about why systems thinking is so important.
yeah. Thank you. We had another really good question, and I thought maybe we could end on this one.
Sure.
Um, there's a lot of good resources in the chats too of the webinar. People are talking about ancestral healing, different activities or events around the country that work towards that. Bob had a really good question. He said, I like to go back to the earlier question, the parallel of that to Duran. He's asking Dick, what's it like for you as a white guy to work across race, gender, etc.? I think that's a really important question because Black Therapists Rock exists because there's not enough of us. And so what I like to tell people is most of the time, if you go to therapy, you're probably gonna not have a Black therapist. And so
Yeah.
I think it's so important for white therapists to be familiar with their parts and their biases, their preferences, their whatever their fears, unconscious thoughts around race that they maybe
Mhm.
breathed in from our society or from their family, and
Mhm.
to know how that's showing up in therapy with Black clients or elsewise, or
Mhm.
anyone different from you in general, even for Black therapists.
Mhm.
So the question is, what are you trying to stay aware of in the moment, and how is it for you to work across not only race but also gender? That's another very big difference.
That's
Uh,
right.
is to
And
make sure.
patriarchy is one of those four legacy burdens to our culture.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is a good question. And so for me, there are parts of me the main parts of me that I'm aware of when not so much you, Duran, because we have such a good relationship,
Right.
but when I am working across race or across gender, is a part that worries about saying something that would be offensive or triggering to the person unconsciously, that I would say it unconsciously. And so that part is lurking around, uh, sometimes censoring or monitoring or, kind of rehearsing what I'm going to say, things like that. In terms of the, the racism legacy burden, I've done a lot of work on that. And I still notice at times it comes up because I'm really trying to not try and screen it out and so I can notice like when I'm watching TV and a Black person comes on and there's this really back in the back of my mind sense of, oh, what's this person going to say, something like that. And so I still try to work with it. It's young and it has its protective reasons for doing it. But it didn't come up at all with us. Uh, and in general doesn't come up when I'm interacting with people much at all. And I just spend so much of my life with women, uh, sort of dominated by women. Uh, and so I've worked a lot with the parts that had any kind of pro-male biases. So that doesn't come up almost at all.
Mm. I could say for myself as a Black woman, I still have a lot of parts that I'm working with that, feel very distrustful of white people, sometimes very distrustful of men. My family was also very female dominated. A lot of Black families are very matriarchal. Um, and there was a lot of absence of male presence for me. And so I've been getting in touch with my feminine side, literally. I have a part that had to be dug up, and
Mhm.
feeling proud to be a woman, and owning my womanness and what that means for me, and not what it means according to society, but what it means for me. And really not seeing, my womanness as weakness, but
Mhm.
as strength, as we talked about earlier today. So, just getting in touch with those parts and being, like I said, having that conversation inside with myself, around all of the various aspects of my identities.
Yeah, and you spent a lot of years in the military too. So
Exactly. That's what I mean. I'm the oldest of three girls. I'm a Leo, if you're into astrology. I have a lot of masculine energy. And I think a lot of, I hate to say it, or I mean, I don't hate to say it, but this is my bias or my preference, or just something that I think a lot of Black women have a lot of masculine energy because we've had to.
mhm.
We've had to be the leaders of our family, our community. And I also am now learning again how to have compassion for Black men. Because I didn't, have that experience. Oftentimes, I'm learning to turn my anger and my pain into love and compassion and understanding,
Mhm.
so that we can share the leadership, or that we can, really understand each other and the
Yeah.
roles we played in our community. So
Well, before we stop, Duran, first, I want to thank you again for being so vulnerable in front of all these people. And I'm so glad we could help that little girl. And,
yeah.
given what you said about your ACEs score, you have amazing trust in yourself. And yourself has amazing respect from your parts. And so it's just an honor to have you in the community.
Yeah, I'm always thrilled to contribute and be here.
Right.
So, all right, you guys, thank you for being here with us and joining in and contributing to this conversation. Keep it going. Share this to your page if you're on Facebook or YouTube. Share this. I think this is an important conversation that we all need to be having right now.
I do too. And if there is a way to save the chat thing, I'd love to read some of these. So I hope
Yeah,
maybe Sarah, you can do that.
I think she's on it. I trust her. All right, everyone, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.